Welcome to the English Effect. Today, we are doing a deep dive into a really important topic for your workplace communication, and that topic is coaching conversations.
Yes. Hi, everyone. We're going to learn some highly useful business English vocabulary today. We'll be looking at how real leaders talk to their teams.
Exactly. Our mission today is to decode the exact language, the psychology, and the conversational frameworks that top-tier leaders use to elevate their teams.
Right. And we are pulling from a really fascinating stack of sources for this deep dive. We have a premium business English lesson on coaching vocabulary, some academic journals, and real corporate case studies.
It's going to be a great discussion. So I want you, the listener, to think back to your very last one-on-one meeting at work. Just picture that dynamic for a second.
Yeah, picture the room, the conversation.
Right. Were you truly coaching the person sitting across from you? Or were you just managing them? Handing out instructions and just checking off a to-do list?
It is kind of an uncomfortable question, honestly, because, well, we tend to blur the lines between being a boss and being a coach.
We really do.
But the reality of today's business world is that traditional old school management it doesn't cut it anymore.
No, it doesn't. You need people who can think critically.
Exactly. And mastering the specific vocabulary by coaching conversation is basically the secret to keeping your best employees and increasing your revenue.
It really unlocks potential. But to understand this shift, we first need to define what we're moving away from. Let's look at a key vocabulary word here. Directive. Directive management style.
Right, the directive style. This is your old school boss. They push explicit instructions and specific solutions onto you.
Like, do this exactly this way by 5 p.m.
Yes, precisely. They give directions. And to be fair, sometimes you need that style.
Right. If you have a brand new employee, they don't know the systems yet, you have to be directive.
Exactly. You push the information to them. But, and this is key, if you only rely on that directive style as they gain experience, you become the ceiling to their potential.
Which introduces our next big vocabulary word, non-directive coaching.
Yes. Non-directive.
So if directive management is about pushing solutions, non-directive coaching is about pulling insights out of the employee.
Pulling the answers out of them, right. And great coaches don't just pick one style and stay there forever. They operate on a continuum.
A continuum meaning a sliding scale between the two.
Right. So for skills coaching, like teaching someone a new software, you lean directive.
Because they just need the fast.
Exactly. But for developmental coaching, where you want them to grow and solve problems, you lean non-directive.
So you let them find the answers.
Yeah.
Okay, but let me push back a little here.
Sure. Go ahead.
If I'm managing a project and we have a really strict deadline, why can't I just be directive? I mean, giving them the answers is so much faster.
Yeah. It seems faster in the short term, yes. But it fails in the long term because of human psychology. And this brings us to self-determination theory.
Oh, this is fascinating. The 3 psychological killers.
Right. There are 3 things employees need to thrive. If you just give them the answers all the time, you crush these pillars. The first one is autonomy.
Autonomy. That's a great business English word.
Yeah.
It means independence.
Essentially, yes. It's the need to self-regulate, to feel internal control over your own work. It is the exact opposite of being micromanaged.
Wait, but if I give an entry-level employee total autonomy, that sounds like a disaster.
Well, yeah.
I mean, if they don't know the industry, giving them total independence just sounds like chaos.
That's a really good point, and it's a crucial distinction. Autonomy here doesn't mean a lack of structure. The manager still sets the goal.
Okay.
You define the what, but you give them the autonomy to figure out the how.
So a directive style is like giving an employee a GPS that just barks turn-by-turn directions at them. But a non-directive style is teaching them how to read a map so they can navigate the terrain themselves.
That is a perfect analogy. Yes. So the second pillar is competence.
Competence.
Yeah.
Feeling capable and effective.
Exactly. The need for mastery. If a boss constantly steps in and solves the problem, they are subtly saying, I don't think you are competent enough to do this.
Ouch. Yeah, that really hurts motivation.
It really does. So you have to support their competence with challenging assignments and clear feedback. And then the third pillar is relatedness.
Relatedness, so feeling connected to others.
Right. The need for belonging and secure, trusting relationships at work. It means showing unconditional positive regard.
Basically, valuing the employee as a person, not just a worker.
Yes. And what's fascinating here is what happens when you hit all 3 of those pillars.
Something shifts in their brain, right?
Exactly. You trigger a process called internalization.
Internalization. So the motivation moves from the outside to the inside.
Right. They stop doing the work just because the boss told them to, and they start doing it because they actually care about it. They own the work.
But, knowing the psychology is only half the battle.
True.
I mean, how do you actually facilitate that internalization in a real conversation? What are the actual words you use?
It all comes down to the architecture of the dialogue. And the sources give us two really powerful vocabulary words here: symmetry and resonance.
Symmetry, that's an interesting word for a corporate environment,
It is, yeah. Symmetry implies an equal partnership, mutual respect.
which is very different from the usual asymmetric power dynamic,
Yeah.
where the boss sits behind a big desk and talks down to the employee.
Right. In a symmetric coaching conversation, you are exploring the problem side by side as equals. And when you achieve that symmetry, you get resonance.
Resonance, I love that word. It's like that light bulb moment.
Yes, that rare moment of perfect shared clarity. The coach and the employee see the reality of the situation in the exact same way. It just clicks.
But how do we actually create that resonance? We can't just cross our fingers and hope it happens.
No, you have to use a specific tool. And the secret sauce is the questions you ask, specifically a framework called Socratic questioning.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because when I hear Socratic questioning, I think of ancient philosophy.
Sure, Socrates.
Or I think of a law professor aggressively interrogating a student until they look foolish. That doesn't sound very supportive.
Right, the combative version is a distortion. In modern coaching, Socratic questioning is highly supportive. It has 4 distinct phases.
What are they?
First, gathering information. Second, active listening to share reflection. Third, reframing limiting beliefs. And fourth, summarizing into an actionable plan.
Our academic source on Socrates actually uses 2 ancient Greek concepts to explain this, which I found so helpful.
Oh yes, Botheia and Maieutikos.
Right. So boetheia means partnership, coming to someone's aid, and maieutikos means midwifery.
Midwifery. Think about how fundamentally that changes your role as a manager.
You aren't the one giving birth to the idea. You are just the midwife helping the employee birth their own truth.
Exactly. You're just assisting the process.
So practically speaking, for our listeners learning business English, how do we structure our sentences to be a good midwife? What questions should we use?
The golden rule here is to use open-ended questions.
Open-ended questions.
Yeah.
So questions that cannot be answered with a simple yes or no.
Right. They usually start with what or how. So instead of asking, "Did you finish the report?" which is a yes or no question,
You ask, how are you approaching the data for the report?
yes, it invites deep reflection.
But I notice there's one question word we are supposed to completely avoid.
Yes, never ask why.
Wait, really? Why seems so basic?
It seems innocent, but structurally it sounds accusatory. If you ask, "Why did you do it that way?" you trigger their defensiveness.
Oh, I see. It makes them feel like they have to defend their past actions instead of looking forward to a solution.
Exactly. So instead of "Why did you do that?" switch it to a what question.
Like, what was your thought process behind that approach?
Perfect. Yes, that keeps the symmetry. Another trap to avoid is leading questions.
Leading questions, where you are subtly pushing them to the answer you already want.
Right, like asking, "Don't you think it would be better to loop the design team in earlier?"
That's not a real question. That's just a boss giving an instruction disguised as a question. It's so manipulative.
It is, and the moment the employee realizes you're just manipulating them, the partnership dissolves.
Okay, I get it. But let me ask you this. If I'm a manager and I have a strict deadline, isn't Socratic questioning just way too slow?
What's fascinating here is that the data says the opposite. Socratic questioning actually saves time.
Really? How?
Well, there's a case study in our sources about a finance manager. He was trying to push through a major corporate reorganization, and his team was resisting him at every turn.
So if he had used the old school directive approach, what would have happened?
He would have just demanded the data. They would have dragged their feet. It would have taken months of friction and fighting. But instead, he used Socratic questioning. He asked open-ended questions. He used listening to understand.
And what did he find out?
He uncovered a hidden fear. His team felt their jobs were threatened by the reorganization. By addressing that root cause, he solved the problem in an hour.
Wow. So it saved him weeks of invisible resistance.
Exactly.
But let's look at the emotional side of this. What happens when you ask an open-ended question and the employee reacts with anger or sarcasm?
Or they just go totally silent.
Right. Because in the real workplace, difficult conversations have high stakes and strong emotions.
This is where we talk about psychological safety. To survive a difficult conversation, a leader must establish two things: mutual purpose and mutual respect.
And if psychological safety breaks down, human biology takes over. People go into a fight-or-flight response.
Yes, the amygdala in the brain gets hijacked.
Our sources detail some very specific coping mechanisms people use when this happens. It's like watching an animal baring its teeth when cornered, but in a corporate boardroom.
It really is. So under the fight response, you see things like masking.
Masking.
Yeah.
Using sarcasm or inappropriate humor to hide how upset you are.
Right. Or controlling,
Right.
where the employee constantly interrupts you or talks over you.
Then there's labeling, where they dismiss you entirely, and attacking, which is just straight-up emotional outbursts or insults.
And the flight responses are just as bad. Withdrawing, for instance.
Withdrawing. Giving one-word answers, checking out, or even crying to halt the conversation.
Yeah.
So if I'm a manager and my employee's radiating hostility and just giving me one-word answers, how do I neutralize that?
You have to use a very practical tool to neutralize their defenses. It's called the SBI framework.
The SBI framework. Let's break that vocabulary down for our listeners. SBI.
It stands for Situation, Behavior, Impact.
Okay, let's run through an example.
Let's say an employee was looking at their phone during an important meeting. A bad manager would say, "You never pay attention. You don't care about this team."
That's attacking their character.
Exactly. That triggers the fight or flight response.
Right.
So instead, you use SBI. You start with situation. You anchor it in a specific time and place.
So you say, during the staff meeting yesterday afternoon.
Right. Then you state the behavior. Only observable facts. No assumptions about their feelings. You were on your phone for 10 minutes.
Okay, situation, then behavior, and then the I is impact.
Yes. You explain how their behavior affected you or the team. Quote, "It made me feel disrespected, and it distracted the team."
Wow, that is so much cleaner.
It works because it prevents the number one mistake managers make, which is judging the individual's intentions rather than their actions.
Right, you aren't calling them a bad person, you're just stating facts.
Exactly. It keeps the dialogue objective and safe.
So we have Socratic questioning, and we have the SBI framework. But what if the issue isn't about skills or communication at all? What if a performance issue reveals a much deeper existential crisis for the employee?
This brings us to the final and really the most profound framework from our sources today, the business coaching taxonomy.
The taxonomy. It divides coaching into 3 distinct layers, right? Puzzles, problems, and mysteries.
Yes, and to understand this, let's look at a case study from the sources about 2 colleagues, Sue and Peter.
Okay, so Sue's the manager, and Peter's a senior employee. They've been good friends for 15 years. But suddenly, Peter's performance is dropping terribly.
Right, so Sue needs to step in. She needs executive coaching to solve the problem.
The problem being the messy strategic situation. Like, should she confront him? When should she do it?
Exactly. And once she decides to have the meeting, she needs performance coaching to solve the puzzle.
The puzzle is the specific behavior, like practicing exactly what words to say in the meeting.
Right. But there's a third layer. What if Sue's real struggle isn't a problem or a puzzle? What if it's a mystery?
A mystery. Like, what if she is struggling with the ethics of being a corporate manager?
Yes. What if she's thinking, why am I prioritizing corporate production over my 15-year friendship with Peter?
That is a deep existential conflict.
It is. It's a clash of fundamental beliefs and values.
Right.
And you cannot solve a mystery with a simple performance coaching solution. You need alignment coaching.
Alignment coaching. There's another great case study in the sources about this, the case of Tom.
Oh, Tom, yes. The company president.
Right, so Tom's business was doing okay on paper,
Yeah.
but his personal life was falling apart. His wife told him she felt like a rose dying on the vine.
Dying on the vine, meaning she felt completely neglected and starved for his attention.
Exactly, it's a great idiom. And at the same time, Tom was battling these massive ethical struggles over his company's bankruptcy.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Tom is dealing with a mystery, a massive alignment mystery.
Right, you can't just give Tom a time management puzzle to fix his marriage.
No, you have to address his core values and his life's purpose.
But how do you actually do that in a business setting? How do you coach someone through a mystery?
You use a structure called the GROW model. GROW.
Goal, reality, options, will.
Yes. It seamlessly moves a vague, frustrating problem into a concrete solution that the employee owns.
So even with a deep mystery, you still use those open-ended Socratic questions.
Exactly. You ask them to define their goal, then you ask them to assess their current reality, then brainstorm options, and finally, establish the will or the commitment to act.
That is so powerful. It brings everything full circle.
It really does.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to summarize this for you, our listeners. Think about the journey we just took.
We covered a lot of vocabulary today.
We did. We traveled from the basic vocabulary of the directive boss versus the non-directive coach.
We learned about the psychological needs of autonomy, competence, and relatedness.
We explored the symmetry of Socratic questioning, using open-ended questions to act as a midwife to great ideas.
And we learned how to disarm those fight or flight responses with the SBI framework: situation, behavior, impact.
And finally, how to address those deepest mysteries of values using alignment coaching and the GROW model.
These aren't just trendy management buzzwords. They are the literal blueprints for transformational leadership. By changing your vocabulary and your conversational structure, you shift from being a traditional boss to a true partner.
Absolutely. So I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder today. Look at your own career right now.
Yes, think about your daily work.
Are the daily frustrations you face simply performance puzzles that just need a tactical solution? Or are they symptoms of a deeper alignment mystery, a clash between your core values and your current environment?
That's a great question to ask yourself.
What open-ended question could you ask yourself today to find out?
I love that.
We hope you enjoyed this deep dive on the English effect. We'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment using one of our new vocabulary words from today's lesson, like autonomy or directive.
Or just share your favorite phrase from the discussion.
And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The English Effect to keep improving your business English. We'll see you next time.